good. So welcome everybody, and welcome to the Let's Talk series, which is brand new. And tonight I'm going to talk about energy, consciousness and healing. And but before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that I speak from Aboriginal land, unceded Aboriginal land, and I'm on the land of the Cammeraygal people of the Eora Nation in Sydney. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past and present. And I'd also like to honour the richness of the stories from this part of the country and their history and their amazing care of the land. And I'd also like to welcome any Aboriginal people who may at some point be watching or listening, including tonight. So welcome everyone, and probably just get started because this is a very, very interesting topic. And the important thing, first of all, is to understand exactly what energy is. Now, that's kind of a difficult question to answer, but energy is life force. We are surrounded by energy. We are surrounded by life force. Our entire environment, natural environment, is energy. The rocks, the trees, the plants, the grass, the rain, the ocean. Everything is energy. The animals, the humans, we are all energy. And the law of energy is, it's very simple. Energy connects with energy. And energy has no boundaries. And so what can kind of really throw us from understanding, having a good understanding of energy, is our cognitive mind. And that's our thinking mind. And as we know, it creates thoughts. That's what it does most of the time. And it creates, may I say, far too many thoughts. And it can become very racy and completely distract us from who we are. It can really disconnect us from who we are and distract us from what is real and what is really happening in our environment. And, you know, you'll hear it talked about collective consciousness. And I'm going to talk about that tonight as well, because, you know, we're meditators. And what is happening when we're meditating? We are, because our thoughts are energy and our feelings are energy. They're things. They actually are things, and they have an energetic force attached to them. And so what we think is important and what we feel is very important. And collective consciousness is profoundly important, but every single one of us contributes to the collective consciousness. Now, when we meditate, what happens is that our consciousness actually expands. I mean, when we're in a very deeply immersive, connected, concentrated form of meditation. And this expansion of awareness and consciousness is what brings us, and this again is another kind of powerful explosion of energy. It can be powerful. We call it realization. And the realizations that we have in meditation or through our meditation are what carry us forward. They promote a lot of spiritual growth. And as meditators, we have a trajectory. And what that trajectory is about is moving towards the truth all the time. And so this thing that we call belief, we have beliefs. Everybody has beliefs. Some of them may be true. Most of them may be false. You know, the Sufis say we live in the world of lies. Even Donald Trump said it. And so there is, what we believe is very, very powerful. Because depending on what we believe, we will base our attitudes, our choices, and our actions. And all of those are going to be based on what we believe to be true or false. And when we speak the truth, like right now I'm talking about energy. Now, that when I say everything is energy, that is true. And that is the truth. And so it has a particular energy field attached to it. And when truth is spoken, the energy field will really open up. And it will have a vibrational frequency that really touches us. People will be touched by the truth. It's like we know, we don't have to analyze the truth because we will feel it in every cell in our body and in every atom of our being. And so to speak the truth shifts the energy. And when we hear the truth, the energy shifts. And we call these in quantum physics, this is referred to as the creation of a morphogenic field. It opens up. And, you know, back in the 19-something or others, it was commonly believed, it was commonly held that it was impossible for anyone to break the 4-minute mile. The rougher runners to run a 4-minute mile. And Roger Bannister, who probably wasn't the greatest runner in the world, but he didn't believe it. So he practiced and practiced, and he broke the 4-minute mile. He was the first person to do it. And so you see, when people believe something that is false, how restrictive and limiting that is to society. and also to people who would, a lot of people who like to do that. Now, after Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, everyone was doing it. And so it opens up. This is how I mean truth opens up the collective consciousness. The energy shifts because false belief is proven to be false, and the truth emerges and everybody knows it. And so this is how the collective consciousness works. Energy explains everything. Back in about 1935, there was a guy in America called Bill Wilson, and he was dying. He was dying in a hospital in New York, a hospital for alcoholics. And he'd been drinking for decades and gambling and smoking, and he'd completely destroyed his life, his marriage, his family. And he was in a very, very low mental state. He was in this sort of hospital for dying alcoholics, and he actually wanted to die. He did not want to recover. There was no treatment at that time for alcoholism or people with addictions. And in those days, the doctors, medical profession treated everybody for everything. Psychology was only just opening up in a very limited way at that time. And because there was no treatment, people thought it was incurable. And so, you know, someone had a very serious addiction to alcohol or something else, people believed, well, you know, it's a one-way street here. But in fact, what happened to Bill Wilson was that he believed he was dying. The doctors felt that he wasn't going to last much longer. He wasn't well. He was very unwell. And, you know, his wife and family came to say their goodbyes. And he was very, very depressed, mentally and emotionally. And it was quite early in the evening, and he turned out the lights and he just went to sleep, into an exhausted sleep. And very early in the wee small hours of the next morning, he was awoken by a light that entered his room. And the light was quite close to him, and it woke him up. And he just stared at this light, not understanding what the light was, but he said the feeling that he got from the light was so intense and so powerful and so deeply comforting. He just knew everything was going to be all right. And he went back to sleep, and then he woke up the next morning and he was full of energy and he felt fantastic. He felt really uplifted. And he knew what he had to do, that he had to go and knock on people's doors in that hospital and say, I need to talk to you. I'm an alcoholic and I need to talk to you. And that's what he did. And he talked to other people who were also in there dying. And he said, I need to talk to you because I'm an alcoholic. And I've never really talked to another alcoholic about what it's like. And so they all started talking and sharing their experiences. And that was the beginning of the formation of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was formed in 1935 in New York by a group of about, I don't know, there were 8 or 10 or a dozen members, I can't remember now. And they were the people he had spoken to in that hospital. And a worldwide movement began, which became the largest spiritual movement in the world, cross-culturally, and so many people have since, up until the present day, and are still recovering in that program. And so, you know, this is how consciousness and collective consciousness works. So I make choices based on my beliefs, and I do actions based on these choices. If the belief is false, then the energy will go in a negative direction. I may not know that belief is false, but regardless, the energy will go in a negative direction. If I believe something to be true and it really is true, then the energy moves in a positive direction. So false beliefs take us into darkness, powerlessness and emptiness, whilst the truth takes us into light, empowerment, openness and expansion. And so this is why we need to be very, very careful about what we believe. And very discriminating. You know, in Raj Yoga we learn, well, the first spiritual power that we really develop is the power to discriminate, and then the power to judge. And it is absolutely has to happen that way, because we are using our power to discriminate all the time, and we need it all the time, because a normal person would probably make hundreds of decisions every day without giving it much reflection. Some decisions we think about a lot, others we just make bang like that and don't think about it terribly much, because we kind of know. And so this power of discrimination is very, very important in terms of what's happening in our consciousness. To experience the truth of energy, one must feel. We must feel intuitively, and intuitively recognize, or just it's that inner knowing, that gut knowing, without our head getting in the way. Because what we have to realize about the human mind that is kind of associated with cognition or thinking is that it has been hijacked by ego. And ego is a false construction of the self. It's a false construction of self. In other words, the mind hijacked by ego will argue and rationalize and justify, and it is actually creates a closed system. And a closed system is very, very limiting and constricting. And when we believe something to be true and it actually isn't, that puts us in a box. And we have lots of boxes. You know, if I believe that I'm never going to be successful at anything, or I'm no good, or, you know, maybe I got some pretty bad messages from my school teachers or people who were influential when I was growing up, might have been in my own family. We'll say, well, that'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Kids who are told they're no good and they'll never be any good, will take that on board and believe it. And then they won't, they'll be breaking the law and the police will be knocking on the door and so on. So, you know, what we believe is incredibly important, and we need to use our power of discrimination and our power to judge and our other powers to know that, you know, to question. Critical thinking used to be taught much more broadly than it is now. And critical thinking is vital because it teaches us to question everything in a very constructive way, and not just to swallow something whole without putting it through a bit of analysis. You know, I don't know about you, but when I began to hear the knowledge that we call Raj Yoga, I went through a period of really, really questioning everything. Questioning this notion of God. I mean, that was a lot of that was because I was an atheist previously. And so, you know, I had to really get answers to my questions. But the thing is, you can't always get those answers out of a book or, you know, look it up on Google. You've got to meditate. You've got to go inside and really understand what it is that I'm feeling. Because the part of us that really knows is the intuitive part of us, which is the soul, and that kind of has a very strong connection to our heart. So we actually feel when something is truth. And our mind really can get in the way because it can argue with our intuition and say, oh no, that's ridiculous. And can set out to prove to us in a quite a rational way why that's not true. But to experience the truth, we must be able to feel the energy. And this is called stepping out of the box. And this is when we step out of a closed system. A box is just a closed belief system. And, you know, we'll often hear someone says, oh, you know, they think out of the box. They think creatively. This is why we desperately need creative people in our world and in our social networks and in our organisations, because really creative thinkers only probably represent about 2% of the population. And they're often very misunderstood by mainstream because their vision is greater. And so they think out of the box, they understand, they see out of the box. And so I want to talk about, you know, what is consciousness? Well, consciousness is, it's like when a child is born, the soul has a body, has taken a body, and in the baby, the combination of a brain, a body, and a soul inside the body, inside that brain, is what forms consciousness. Those three things have to exist together at the same time. And so consciousness is really, it's sort of like a bag. And if you imagine a little baby, babies don't have cognitive function, so they don't think. They don't have the ability to think because their brain is unformed. It's very, very unformed when the child is born, and will spend the next few years using a huge amount of energy developing. The brain development uses up the lion's share of a child's energy. The first 2 years of life are massive for brain development. And all those little neural pathways going nuts and creating consciousness. And so, the baby has its little baby consciousness. It's tiny. And then as it grows and it starts to really begin to understand the primary caregiver, or its mum, and its father, or whoever, is primarily taking care of them and is around them, the family, the baby is taking in all this information and forming all these neural pathways. And so the consciousness is developing. There's a huge amount of learning going on. And within that consciousness, which I say is just like a container or a bag, is the furniture. It's like it's filled with furniture. And that it enables us to function with the body. So the effect of stimuli on consciousness is really quite profound. So if you look at a beautiful vista, you look out over the ocean or into the mountains, into the forest, it will have a profound effect on you. The body chemistry will change, your brain chemistry will change, your brain will start producing the relaxing chemicals, endorphins, dopamine, serotonin. You play beautiful music, it's like, and you relax. Whereas if you're looking out a window of a train in, say, suburban Sydney, and you're listening to heavy metal on your headphones, then your brain's going to produce all the stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and it will make you feel quite alert. And what that does, it actually suppresses our immune response and our ability to relax. And so we have the embodied brain, which is vital for consciousness. Our soul, the soul itself, sits in the part of the brain that is called the limbic brain. And this has been conclusively shown to be the truth in neuroscientific research, which I have personally seen. And that was back in the early 2000s. Around about probably 2004, 2005. But neuroscience hasn't been around that long, 20 to 30 years. 20, maybe 20 years in its current kind of very moving forward type state. And so we've seen through thousands and thousands and thousands of people being researched when they're hooked up to MRIs and scans and so on, and they are stimulated emotionally, this point in the limbic brain lights up. And the limbic brain, we've actually got three brains, human beings. We've got our brain stem, which is the first brain. Then on top of that, we've got the limbic brain. And then on top of that, we've got the third brain, which in which our frontal lobe and our grey matter is, and that's where executive functions and all kinds of other things take place. And human beings and dolphins are the only life form that have this third brain. Mammals, other mammals, we're mammals, but other mammals in the animal kingdom, they actually don't have that third brain. So they just have the first and second brain, and reptiles only have the first brain. So they don't have a feeling response, whereas a cat or a dog or a horse or a cow, whatever, because mammals suckle their young, they have feelings. And but they don't have the ability for analytical thinking and other executive function that we have. And so our limbic function is a huge contributor to our consciousness. Our heart is what connects to the limbic brain. And the research that's been done in America, there's an organisation called the HeartMath Institute, and they do a lot of quantum research, and they have measured the energy field of like all our organs, and the heart, our biggest energy field is the heart, and that can extend out meters from the body. And the soul, this tiny little soul sitting in the limbic brain, is sending massive feed of energy to the heart. And it goes into the heart, and the heart then pumps it. It goes into the blood and it gets pumped around the entire body. And so what is in that blood is life force coming from the soul in the limbic brain. And the heart pumps the blood containing life force energy around to every cell and atom in the body. And this is what keeps us alive. It's not the blood itself, it's the life force in the blood. And so if there is circulatory collapse or someone punctures a major artery, and there is no intervention, then they will just bleed out and die without that life force. We say it's blood loss because that's what we can see, but in actual fact, the physical body is starved of life force, and so it can't function anymore. And we know from the neurocardiological research, which is an even newer field, the neuroscience, these studies done on the heart are really quite amazing, because what they've done, they've found neural pathways in the heart. Now, neural pathways had only ever been found in the brain. Everything we do becomes a neural pathway. And so for these to show up in the heart just has blown away these members of the medical profession who've really taken this on. And because what they know now is that the heart thinks independently of the brain. And it is my understanding from my own, and I mean from my own experience, I don't mean from any science, but from my own experience of doing extensive amounts of prolonged silence over the past 22, 23 years, that when we are in a much higher consciousness, or when we are truly soul conscious, our cognitive mind, our thinking, the mind as we know it, will not actually function. That the heart will take over. And the experience that I base that on is the experience I had when I was living in LA. It was early 1984. And I had come in contact with Raj Yoga and with BKs there. And the BKs there were actually one person, one or two people. And so I was thrown into turmoil because it disturbed my worldview so much. And it wasn't even so much what I was hearing, because I was saying to them, please don't tell me all this spiritual mumbo jumbo. But what I was feeling was absolutely confounding me. And, you know, I was a hard-nosed atheist, and I had this experience of being given the gift for 3 weeks of being totally soul conscious. Now, I've never heard of this happening to anybody else, but I'm telling you, it really happened. And I worked in Hollywood at the time. I was working on a horror movie. And I went to work every day. I functioned. I did my job. Can't remember what I did, but obviously there were no complaints. So I was doing what I needed to be doing. But my feet never touched the ground. It was like my heart opened, and there was this gushing river of energy, of love, just pouring out of me. I never, ever had experienced anything like it. But I hope I will again. And I didn't analyse what was happening to me. I was in a state of supersensuous joy and bliss and happiness. I don't know how else to explain it. At the time, I didn't analyse what was happening because I was so in the present. I wasn't even using my thinking mind. I was just in the flow. I was just doing. And I had that experience again at this deep silence retreat I've just done in early February up at Lura. It was like I was given that experience again. But also issued the challenge of, okay, now you've got to work out how to hold on to it. And I know that my thinking mind was not functioning. It was disabled, or it was transformed in some way by being in that very high stage of consciousness. And so I believe that when we are all soul conscious, we won't actually be thinking. in the way we understand thinking. We will know. We will be using our heart, our understanding through the heart, or the way that the heart thinks or knows or understands, this is how we will be functioning in the future. And, you know, we are frequently told in Merleys that talk about golden age, that we won't be talking. And I absolutely get that. It will not be necessary, because anything that comes from speech or the thinking mind is automatically limited. But when we are able to use the language of the heart, when we're able to feel, when that level of us is completely open, the transaction that will take place energetically will be quite profoundly beautiful and unlimited, absolutely unlimited. And so in a very high consciousness, we have to become unlimited. There won't be those walls and boundaries that restrict us so much at the present time. Now, I'm just noticing the time, and I can rave on all night, but I'm just wondering whether you have any questions at this point. You will need to unmute yourself if you have questions.
Hi, Jude. I just wanted to say that I've just found listening to what you've had to say fascinating, and I agree with the heart language that you don't need words. And I often, I think I've been a lot like that in my past, and just in these last few years, I've had to work on finding the words to make sense of what I'm feeling. It's been an interesting journey. So this is the most I think I've ever talked in my whole life. I have a lot of books, but I've hardly read any of them. And I tend to, open them up to find perhaps those words to make sense of what I'm feeling. That's sort of what it's, I suppose, a language to make sense of what I'm feeling when I don't get to talk to people. So anyway, so that's, I would have 101 questions. I wouldn't even know where to start. So I could listen for some time. So thank you. If a question comes to mind, I will. I may email you.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please
thank
do.
You. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
You're welcome.
But and we do. Our first response to everything is a feeling. When the when there's stimulation, the first thing to respond is our limbic brain, that point in the limbic brain, which is where the soul sits. So our first response to everything is a feeling. We then have a thought which enables us to make sense of the feeling. And that's how we function at the moment.
Yeah.
But my belief is that in the future, we will bypass that. And it's also my belief that our brain will be quite different in the future.
I have a feeling at the moment that working intuitively, it's almost like there's no words there. There's this sense to know what to do next. And so I've currently had some time off work, and I'm getting to experience that, which is really nice. So I couldn't even explain what I've done for the past 2 months, except just whatever's needed to be done next.
Mm.
So it's been an interesting time for discovery of, and it's been, good to hear what you've had to say, because it's a relief.
Yes.
Yeah, feels like a sense of relief that that's coming, and that's actually going to be more of the way that we live.
Mm.
You.
Yeah, well, everyone says trust your intuition. It will never lead you astray.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lydia, did you want to ask anything?
Yeah. First, I wanted to say thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I wrote a whole lot of stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the questions is the story you were telling us about Bill. Is it from AA? Yeah. So, what do you think invoked that light? Where did that come?
Where did that light come from?
Was he a believer?
Was
he a believer? Did he believe in God? Thank you.
Well, I'd say Bill Wilson was being had a spiritual experience, and which cannot be explained scientifically or whatever, but it was clearly a spiritual experience, because the transformation in him as a result of that experience was miraculous. And my interpretation of the light was that was God. Who else could it be?
Yeah, he took it on board. Bill took it on board. That's the thing. He took it in.
Yeah, that light was able to absolutely connect with him and break through all of his mental garbage and emotional garbage, and just touch him in the core of his being and wake him up. Instead of, he's in this victim mentality and I'm dying and I just want to die. I'm a terrible person. I've wrecked all these people's lives. I've made a mess of my life. And so he had to break right out of that consciousness. And that's what that light did. And I mean, that is quite miraculous. And so he was used, and look at the millions and probably hundreds of millions, if not thousands of millions of people with addictions have now been able to recover because of that experience he had.
Unbelievable. And they're still using their 12 steps. 12 steps, isn't it? They're still using it all
program,
around the world.
AA and
unbelievable.
all the anonymous programs, which are now for everything. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's great. Fantastic talk. I could listen all night.
Yeah. And I work, as you know, I work with people with addictions, or you may not know, but specialised in it for well over 30 years, and lots of other people as well. But when someone comes to me and they have a very serious addiction, and of course they never want to go to a 12-step meeting, but I say, just go and put your body in the room. Just do that. You don't have to speak or participate. If someone asks you to speak, just say, I'll pass, thank you. And they do it. They will do it. Some won't, some will. And then they'll come back to me and say, I felt so much better when I left that meeting. And I say, okay, you do that every day for 90 days. And I'm counting the days to see how long it'll take for them to stop drinking. And they will not know why they have stopped drinking. But, and this is how energy and consciousness work. Because if I go and put myself in a room, if I've got a drinking problem and I go and sit in a room where there's a whole lot of alcoholics in recovery who've really sorted themselves out, and I keep putting myself in that energy field. Energy connects with energy. Energy has no boundaries. I will absorb that energy field. I can't keep it out. So we have to be very aware of what energy fields we're putting ourselves into, because it affects us. And, you know, those meetings where people share their experience, strength and hope, they're a great example of what I'm talking about. That's why I'm using it. And so if you go and put yourself in a meeting when you've got the same problem as everybody else in that meeting, except most of them are at some level of recovery, many very good long-term recovery, some, you know, various steps along the way. It will work its magic on me, and I won't consciously know what's happened. And that's energy for you.
Wow.
See, our thinking, our state of being, because when someone goes into recovery, their belief system changes. They hand their will over to God, because their will is going to take them to the pub or the liquor store or whatever. When you hand your will over to God and you admit you are powerless over that substance or experience or thing or person, then everything can change. And this is the power of energy and collective consciousness. The medical profession don't understand it.
Not at all. They got no idea.
They've got no idea. And
No idea.
The way they have absolutely downgraded AA and the 12-step programs and the spiritual, something that works spiritually, because they can't put it under a microscope and explain it or take it to a pharmaceutical company.
And you know what, Jude, they're ones in the box. They're boxed in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're the ones living in the box. The box
That's
you're
right.
talking about.
That they are in the box. And so the beauty of understanding, of being an experienced meditator, is that you will have had the experience time and time and time again of the power of realization. Because realization happens right outside the box. And if you follow that explosion of energy, it opens the box. You know, you break out of the box.
Yeah.
And it's very exciting. It gives you so much energy. You know, it's like the rain. It's pouring here where I am. Nice storm. But, you know, the rain illuminates the energy of nature. You know, the plants, the trees, the grass, everything kind of really tingles with aliveness after the rain and all that lovely dose of nitrogen. And when we have a realization, we start twinkling and glowing as well. It's like, wow, this energy just starts exploding inside us. We follow it and we follow it, and then it happens more and more. And so meditation for us is like the rain is for nature. It just feeds our consciousness. It just gets rid of the boxes.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Definitely, but yeah, I believe in that. And so your silence retreat, the people that came back had that look on their faces.
Really?
Like, oh my goodness. I'll tell you, Dan, Thomas C. Ramsey could not stop raving. Like she grabbed the microphone after Merle and spoke to everybody and said, you got to do it. If you do anything in your life, you've got to do this. It was amazing. And everybody, Isabella, she looked like she come back from Tahiti. She was like, Yeah, it was amazing.
Yes.
So something happened something happened.
Oh, a lot happens. We do nothing. We don't speak.
Yeah.
We don't even look at each other.
Yeah.
And so much happens. And, every year it gets better and better and better. Because
That's what
it's
I noticed.
cumulative.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So why don't we
Thank
just...
you. Thank you. That's fantastic.
Well, it's been lovely to share this with you, and I'm going to be talking, along these lines next week. But let's finish with a little bit of silence, shall we?
Sure.
Do you want me to speak a commentary, or are you happy just to sit in silence for a couple of minutes?
I'm fine to sit in silence.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So just feel the silence surrounding you, moving into every atom of your being. Immerse yourself in the silence. The heart imbibes the silence. Silence nourishes the inner universe. So we merge with the silence through our heart. Feel the silence. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Pleasure. Bye.
Absolutely.
Bye for now.